extraordinaire, the GMologist.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Arcaneologist, GM Alienist. GMologist presents or Arcane Alienist, and I have with me one of my partners in crime, BJ Boyd of the Arcane Alienist, and he and I are going to talk about old school games. Can you believe it? We both play a lot of modern games, but we really do dig the old school TSR era games and all the old school, would you call them reprints, reworks? What does the R stand for?
Reprints, retro clones.
Retro
Joe Rick will
clones.
take us to task if we don't call them something different, right?
It could be old school rage, which I propose, or old school renaissance. You pronounce it renaissance, but I pronounce it renaissance. Potato, whatever.
Old school revolution is what
Old
I
school
like.
revolution. I like that. So anyway, we play those too. And what we're going to do is today talk about old school games we played or run, what works and what hasn't, and what we're currently playing or have percolating. And this is really inspired in my mind because of the recent podcast that BJ has been putting out about his ongoing world Tales of Erd. Is that correct? Is it Tales of something? Is it Erd? Earth. Wait.
Yeah, the mythic world of Erd.
Yeah, so his mythic
Erd, URD.
mythic world of Erd that he's running, and he's running with a lot of people. So he decided to use an old school a role set with an old school feel. So he'll talk about that,
Yeah.
I'm sure. But I think first, we both have unboxings today. So you first, BJ.
All right.
And I think these unboxings are appropriate because while not TSR era D&D, they're both for games. Well, BJ has an unboxing. I'm just going to show you the book that I opened already. But they're both for a game that was created back in 1977, revised in 81, and has had various incarnations. If you can guess what it is, well, we'll send you a Benny or something. So go ahead, BJ.
All right. So this box is a proc. I'm not going to measure it, so I don't have a ruler in front of me, but I would guess this is probably 10 inches by 14 inches.
Okay.
Bubble wrap.
That's good.
No
And it was
packaging.
like did it have like the perforated seal?
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that. That's pretty easy to open.
Yeah. But they had tape over it, so I had to slice through the tape.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
But this is the Traveler World Builder's Handbook for Mongoose Second Edition Traveler.
Cool.
It is number 11 in their. I can't remember. You know, they've got the books are numbered. The one with the hex is their kind of core rules, and I can't remember what the triangle is. It's more like the
triangle might be adventures. I didn't even know.
It's more like resources because it's the same as the Third Imperium and Secrets of the Agents. So I think it's like resources for lore of the.
Yeah, the core rulebook has a hex on it. I have a bunch of things that have squares actually, and then triangles. Well, triangles seem to be all adventures, or actually adventures and I guess like support and resources because behind the claw also has a triangle. So does the Third Imperium.
Yeah, the two I have with the triangle are the Third Imperium and Secrets of the Agents, and now this.
Yep. Well, I'm gonna have to reorganize my shelf then. Based on, I never noticed that. Crazy. I wonder what Pirates of Drinax has on
So this is
spine.
Yeah. So this says that this is a tool set for expanding a world or star system into a fully realized place to explore. It includes procedures for determining the type and location of a system's significant stars and worlds, an expression of the main world, determining the physical and social characteristics of the star system. So it's really like if you want to build your own star system to run your games in, this is how to flesh it out into a complete setting.
That's cool. I gotta see if I can get something. I have a world builder's handbook. Let's see, find. Yes, I do. But my world builder's handbook is much older. It is the World Builder's Handbook that was made for Mega Traveler by Digest Group Publications. And you unfortunately you can't get any of these because the person who has all the rights to it is apparently asking a whole lot of money from Mark Miller et al. For the rights to all these Digest Group stuff. So I'm glad that Mongoose is actually reprinting in their way the World Builder's Handbook. So this is a
I think
fantastic
I think
resource.
I think we're about to enter an age where the corporations and the publishing houses that have traditionally owned all this stuff are I think that I hope we're getting an age where they're in for a rude awakening. I know we had the OGL scandal, which really hurt Hasbro. I mean, not it's Hasbro; they're not going anywhere, but it was enough of a crisis for them that they had to, alter their plans. And then, I think if you want to make it difficult for role playing game enthusiasts, they'll just do it themselves.
Yep, and I think that's what Mongoose is going to do.
So enough resources and enough, and so Mongoose, they'll figure out a way to if there's a demand for it, they'll
so that's kind of curious too. And the game we're talking about is Traveler, obviously, if you hadn't guessed. But what's curious is that they had the Onesium quest did extremely well. I think it's like a platinum seller, and it's a module that was always in the advertisements of the old world or the old Mega Traveler Digest Group publication stuff, and they're going to make this epic quest to go to all these different places. And I think, and then it never materialized. But then they found, and the best part of that book though is how they went from like the floppy disks and were able to recover all that information from like floppy disks.
Wow.
Yeah, it's pretty fascinating. And then they made this whole module, but unfortunately, and it was cool because it takes you from like the Spinward marches across, because like Mega Traveler, they had this rebellion, or actually there's a civil war, like the second civil war that happens in the Imperium, and you have to travel across war-torn areas and pursue this quest. And then it's supposed to lead you further to trailing, and then finally rimward, like across the edges of the Imperium or the former Imperium. And I feel like some of the stuff was published in another adventure that actually Game Designers Workshop did, and that was going to be where the Onesium quest took you. But I think I need to do more research. Anyway, I guess that what suffices to say, that was originally a Digest Group Publications thing, and someone just said, "Screw it, I'm not going to wait for this guy to finally, give the rights, sell the rights. We're just going to do it." And it did really well. So kudos to Mark Miller for letting that happen. I mean, he's always been a very open source type of guy. You have, the big map, that they have, and the Traveler Wiki that's available. So yeah. So what I did get a product for Traveler too. I already unboxed it because I was very excited. And that's the torture I'm going to run you guys through after the current set of torture and challenges. And this is Mystery of the Ancients. One of the players has wanted to do, let's do an Ancients kind of related thing. And the other one that they produced, Secret of the Ancients, I feel like you guys are already too you're already too invested in your current campaign that it really wouldn't work. But this one kind of totally falls in line with what's happening in the campaign.
Is that an adventure or is that a source book?
It's an adventure, but it's like thick like a source book.
Okay, because I have the Secret of the Ancient source book, but I haven't looked in it because I didn't.
The Secret of the Ancients is actually an adventure too, but it's also a source book. Mm-hmm. But Secret of the Ancients is, I mean, they're connected, but I don't think you could really take the same travelers through it. It just because I feel like Secret of the Ancients is almost like you've made a new set of travelers. This is your first adventure. I think that's the way that one. And this one you can kind of, it seems like you could roll it into an ongoing campaign, at least whatever it initially, right? Which is gonna make me ask you, do you have any contacts that you haven't named for your character?
I think they're all named. We haven't met any. We've only met one of them.
Okay. On screen. So I think I have to look at your contacts and see, to see, and the other people's to see what contact would be. I know the one who gives you the initial hook.
I know I've got a Varger guy that he traveled with at some point, and then
Mhm.
some pirates that
Yeah.
he tangled with
Yeah.
that we never
Yeah.
really named specifically who they were.
Okay. We'll have to check that out. All right. So on to the meat of the show. And again, this was inspired by BJ's recent success, at least it sounds like it, running games for his son and his son's friends using an old school. So maybe you can, I know that's something that's ongoing, so maybe we're jumping around, but
Mhm.
I think we should just lead with that. And
Okay.
why is that working?
Well, one, we were now up to two parallel campaigns.
Mhm.
Um, when my son had his friends over hanging out, there's a bunch of them. They saw all the books on the shelf, and they're like, "We want to play Dungeons and Dragons." And he was like, "Well, I'm sure my dad would do that." So I said, "Yeah, I'll run. I've let him know forever. Anytime your friends want to play D&D, I'll run a game for you. Um, and he and another one of his friends had helped me test out some ideas I had for kind of tweaking old school essentials,
Mhm.
just because they wanted to just mess around. But this is kind of a bigger group, and I'm like, well, how many? Because I thought I really wasn't set on what rule set to use,
Yep.
but there were 10 of them, and I'm like, there's no way I can run 10 people. That's just too many people with um, any kind of modern WotC era D&D.
Why is that you
I've
think?
run 8 people in fifth edition, and it was just too slow.
Okay.
So I thought, well, why don't we just we're going to have to do this, you know, with something with an older module or older rule set. And I went back and forth between using White Box, which is effectively original D&D, or Old School Essentials. But because I'm more familiar with Old School Essentials, we just went with that.
Mhm.
Um,
I have a question.
sure.
Is White Box Sword and Wizardry? Is that
Well, it was Swords and Wizardry White Box, and as Matt Finch has moved Swords and Wizardry more into an AD&D
okay?
uh, clone.
I thought it was based on OD&D, but now it's AD&D.
It was, but he's expanded it a lot. I
Okay.
think he's it has the I think okay. I don't know if it's AD&D or if it's just OD&D when you include all the supplements and all the stuff from Strategic Review, where you finally got the Ranger class and things like that in there. So
Okay.
you look through the list of kind of what you can be, kind of characters you can be. It looks like AD&D, but I think it may be really still kind of grounded in original D&D
Mhm.
plus, the complete original D&D set plus the stuff that came in Strategic Review.
Okay.
Uh, Somebody can correct me on that. Um, but now we have White Box Fantasy. I have here on the shelf. Yeah, White Box Fantasy Medieval Role Playing Game, and
Oh,
that
you
was
can show it
yeah.
for viewers on the YouTubes, but okay.
And this comes from Seattle Hill Games,
Hmm.
and in my understanding, it is, and this is Charlie Mason is the editor of this series, and my understanding is Matt Finch just gave him permission to keep this version of Swords and Wizardry alive, and they just retitled it White Box
Cool. That's neat. Yeah.
as a medieval adventure game.
Yeah.
This has Matt Finch's blessing, even though somebody else is kind of managing this now. And
Yeah.
of course, White
I was able to
turned
place.
into. Go
No,
ahead.
go ahead. You finish your thought. I don't know why. I thought you were done.
I said White Box has really exploded into there. There's like Eldritch Tales, which Joe Salvador has created a Cthulhu using those
Right.
rule
Right.
kind of game. There's White Star, which is a space opera, um, where you could emulate, Buck Rogers or Flash Gordon or Star Wars. So
There's a
White
World War II
Box,
one. There's a World War II one also.
yeah,
Operation White Box. It's
it's proved to be really flexible. So, and I'm sure I'll circle back around to run that at some point. But I was kind of, I was like, well, I got 10 people coming. I need to use a rule set that I'm kind of familiar with, and I've run a lot of old school essentials over the last few years. So that was just the easiest thing for me to know. I don't have to. I just know how to do this. But I did want to make some tweaks to it with Knave, because I've also gotten really interested in sort of this new, I guess what they call new SR,
mhm.
Knave, Into the Odd, Cairn, those kinds of games. And I know Knave is really kind of meant to just overlay, the old school game of your choice. I think it fits really well with BX or with old school essentials,
Hmm.
or fits really well with white box. So I decided to pull in some stuff from Knave, um, just because it has some of the stuff I like about fifth edition that I still kind of, it's my instinct to do that because I ran a lot of fifth edition before I got back into running
Hmm.
old school essentials. So
Right.
I kind of blended the two, and it's worked really well. I mean, we've had four four sessions. Each group has had two sessions,
Okay.
one with 10 kids and one with four.
Yeah.
I say kids; these aren't little kids; they're teenagers. But they picked up the rules really well. They're learning the system really well. It goes really fast at the table, particularly that larger group. When something
Hmm.
happens, the combat breaks out, or they're exploring the dungeon. They just the procedural. I think the procedures kind of keep everybody on track, and it makes it really easy to kind of just go around the table, see what everybody's doing, and then when it's combat time, the combat goes really. If you can imagine a 5e D&D or Pathfinder 2e combat with 10 players versus a dozen goblins, that would just
Yeah.
they
Because
go on for a long time.
you do the procedural. OSC has the movement, missile, magic, melee, right? Is that
Yeah,
correct?
I pulled in a little more. I adjusted it. I talk about borrowing. I really settled on more something similar to Hyperborea. In
Okay.
fact, not even Hyperborea, but the earlier versions of Hyperborea, when it was still
Hmm.
Astonishing Swords, where if you're not gonna, we're gonna roll initiative, and then we're gonna go through the people who don't have to move. So the
Okay.
winners who aren't going to move take actions. The losing side who's not going to move takes actions. Then we have movement, and then anybody who didn't act prior to movement can take their.
Right. Yeah. So that I think that works out because Hyperborea is like melee first. So those who
Yeah,
are like
I've been doing
engaged,
melee first. Yeah,
those guys who are those adversaries who are engaged with player characters or whatever, go first, and then you kind of move out.
yeah.
But
I go melee,
missile.
magic,
Oh, you go
melee,
magic
missile, magic, miscellaneous actions, and then movement.
movement plus.
If you're just going to move and not do anything else,
Mhm.
and that includes um, fighting withdrawals and retreats.
Okay.
And then the other side does that, and then you can then move and attack, move and missile, magic. You can't move in magic in BX,
Yeah.
um, or then move in any kind of other miscellaneous action. And then I tacked on a if you move and then shoot, there's a -2 penalty
Oh, that's
to
cool.
the attack roll, just to represent that you don't have time to properly aim. You're kind of hustling into a different position and then making a quick shot.
Yeah. OSC, you have to declare magic or
Yeah.
movements, especially withdrawals
And I just have them
beforehand.
declare. I have everybody declare, even if they're just going to stand and fight, or it just makes it easier than to say, okay, now who's going to do. And I let people adjust on the fly as long as it's not something that you can't.
Right.
If you're retreating or going to cast a spell, you've kind of committed to it. But if you say I'm going to attack that guy, I'm going to stand and then you lose initiative and that guy they do a retreat. Okay, you can delay and go into the movement phase and do what.
Right.
So it's
Yeah.
it's really easy to rule just logically on the fly. Like, okay, your plans fell apart. Logically, could you change your course of action? Most times you
Right.
can't.
Yeah.
I also
Oh.
let people delay, like if a rogue or a thief hide, they hide in the corner to ambush somebody.
Hmm.
They don't have to they can wait till the person moves in the room on the which it's technically is part of the enemy's you know phase of initiative, but they've kind of held that action and delayed it to when it kind of
Yeah. Yeah. No, BX
comes
does.
to
Can you do
bear.
that in BX or OSC? I guess you could. There's no.
It doesn't really say you can or can't, but it's what makes logical sense to me that if you've got a thief
Is it
hiding in the
holding?
shadows
Yeah.
wanting to backstab somebody, that they don't have to act
Or
until.
you're guarding a door, and if someone goes through that door, you'll shoot
Yeah,
them. Right.
yeah, you can. And I was just well, I remember playing that back in the day that way. It's just
Yeah.
if it makes sense, there's always been that delay or ready to action there. It just didn't require a bunch of rules. It was like, okay, well, you can wait to do that until the opportunity to do that actually presents itself.
Right. Yeah. I
But
think for me, like I'm there's some things I want to run, and I think I'll get to that later. I
Yeah.
think so.
But I've asked my son because he's played 5e with me
Mhm.
in some other games, and so he probably has the most experience of all of them at the table. Everybody else is just loving it, but they don't know anything different, right?
Yeah.
One kid has played Baldur's Gate 3 as a video game. None of the other ones have any D&D exposure.
Mhm.
But my son has said he seems to like this better because of the speed
Okay.
and the simplicity. Where I mean, he's got a little bit of ADHD, like by honestly, he will get really bored during a protracted combat,
Mhm.
even when he's interested in what's going on, because it, everybody's turn takes so much longer. But when he can kind of watch and it's just like boom, 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 and we know what's happening, he stays fully. They're all staying fully engaged because they got to be ready to go within a few seconds of the person, somebody else,
Yeah,
taking their
and I
turn.
think that's the phases helps with that too, because I
Yeah.
notice in usually to me, um, the the delay in player actions or the slowness comes from player indecision a lot of times. Not saying that's always the case, but a
Yeah.
lot of times it's player indecision, right?
And I think even if I said declare your action and then I just went clockwise around the table and said do what you said you were going to, that would probably work just as well. But I have
Hmm.
that menu in my head. I can see I'm rolling through the checklist when we're doing it in combat,
Hmm.
and it just makes it. I used to really I'd forgotten. I'd gotten so used to kind of modern individual initiative, which has its own advantages and disadvantages.
Hmm.
But I found I think I'm really starting to appreciate it again why that works, particularly when you got a large group. It just keeps things organized,
Yep.
even if it is kind of arbitrary.
Hmm. Yeah, and I wonder if side initiative would work in a modern game. I don't know. Well, it's Shadow because
It's not
Shadow Dark does individual, right? When we played
real.
Shadow Dark, it was individual, right?
Um, yeah, because I think we have initiative scores
Yeah, we have
in Shadow
initiatives.
Dark.
Yeah, yeah. I think
Um,
you roll initiative in that. Same with like a game that wants to get that old school feel like DCC. It's not side initiative; it's individual initiative.
yeah,
Although that's more based on the 3.0, 3.5
yeah.
engine than
When we played Shadow Dark,
ESR.
I saw a similar kind of. We've got the core mechanic is still a modern D20 system, but it's been pared back and simplified into a way that you can play it much more like an old school.
Yeah, it definitely seems like it flows faster.
Yeah.
Um,
Um,
less. Well, we played recently. It'll be on the channel in about a week or so. But we played recently, and it did feel like it went. We only got into like one combat, right? One combat.
yeah, but we had a lot of like technical delays because it was storming, maybe
Yeah,
interconnected problems and
right.
uh,
But I think it does have the potential to go pretty fast. Um,
mhm.
so I did actually like. I was wondering how that in real time clock would work, and it seemed to be pretty cool too. I thought that was
Yeah.
fine. So that I feel like is one that can work. Something like Shadow Dark can work,
Hmm.
and it has a modern sensibility. Um, but what does that mean? A modern sensibility? I don't know. How does it feel modern?
Well, I
Because
think
you
you're
have a
still
lot of
a
you have a lot of
D20. Go ahead.
oh, because it's straight D20, right?
Yeah, it's still the D20 system. It's you're rolling a 20, roll high against a target number.
Mhm.
You got advantage and disadvantage.
Yeah.
You're applying a bonus or a penalty that kind of reflects a combination of your skill and ability score.
Mhm.
I think what slows modern D20 games down is the core mechanic is very simple and very fast and very easy to understand. It's the six ability scores, the 5, 10, 15, 20, 5 increment difficulty classes. And then if you want to include some kind of skill or other thing like that, you got one other number to add in there. That's real fast and advantage, particularly with advantage and disadvantage now
Yeah.
kind of eliminating the DM's need to, well, it's
Figure
going to
out.
-3 penalty, -4 penalty.
Yeah.
So that goes really fast. The thing that slows it down is characters and monsters, all their abilities are based on exceptions. There's like the
Mhm.
rule of how the game works, and every special ability, every unique feature gives that character a way to kind of break the rules.
Mm-hmm.
So you got to read real specifically about what this does allow you to do that isn't in, how it would normally act. And so that exception based design is what really causes the I think both Pathfinder and modern D&D to get real crunchy and real complicated. The
Yeah.
core mechanic is very simple and elegant, but then you start tacking all these riders onto what's happening when somebody takes their turn.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's why I feel
That's
like,
what
oh, do I
takes
need, does
a
it
long
like
time.
even yeah, and even in like Pathfinder where it's three actions go, it's like, oh, does this cost, how many actions does this take? Or is this a reaction? Or you know, but it is
Yeah.
like exceptions. So for example, like the sudden charge thing, and monsters call it something else, but some monsters have this a bit like sudden charge. It's like, oh, well, all of a sudden the move plus the attack are incorporated into one action type of thing, right?
Mhm.
So you see, those are like you said, the exceptions, and you have to know those exceptions. It's almost
Yeah.
like in a game like I think one of the some of the more granular 2D20 games, some can be really simple. You just roll your 2D20, you need successes under your target number, but then there's so many tags for different ability talents and weapons and all that kind of stuff that makes it more complicated because they are, you're like you said, an exception to what's going on. And I guess Shadow Dark strips back a lot of those exceptions, you think? Or is
Yeah, because the characters are simpler. They're running on the same mechanical engine, but it seems like their abilities are more straightforward,
Mhm.
and that's what it seemed to make it run faster to me.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I do hope to revisit that. So my first experience with jumping back into old school type games was with BX, um, and then jumping to OSE when that came out. Although I don't know if I've ever run like an actual OS. I played in an OSE games like your OSE game and
Yeah.
in Jason Hobbs' Kalmata game, uh, but
If you don't use ascending armor class, there's really no. I mean, it's just. I mean, that really it gives you the option to go with ascending armor class, and if you don't do that, and it's the optional rule, it's not the standard rule. No, the OSE is BX. It's like I don't know. It's more like what I would call like a text revision. I don't know if you've ever seen this in like a textbook or a technical manual. They don't change the content;
mhm,
they just organize it for clarity.
yeah,
But that's all old school essentials is. It is BX reorganized for clarity.
yeah, that's
And,
the basic or what they call base. Is it basic fantasy? There's like a
uh, yeah,
classic,
old
yeah, classic fantasy,
classic fantasy, and
and then they
then
have
with the
advanced fantasy.
advanced fantasy add on that
Yeah,
gives
you
you
can,
the first edition AD&D options, but they've been completely reworked to fit the
yes,
BX rule set.
right, right. So I mean, and then yeah, so you can, and even in the advanced fantasy, you can still do race as class or race and class. That's the
Mhm.
option that they give you for that.
And then he's put out a few other with the Carcass Crawler magazines, some other options like to play Dragonborn, Tiefling, Mongrel Men,
Hmm.
Myconids, although he calls Mongrel Men and Myconids something else because they're kind of
Yeah.
IP.
OGL, yeah.
Um, yeah.
IP OGL stuff.
Um,
Yeah, and then Dolemwood is quite, I haven't really looked through Dolemwood to see how different that is too. That's
yeah. The PDFs are available,
dabbings.
but I'm just kind of waiting on the books to
Yeah.
ship where I really dive into it.
But I think I felt like I had a lot of success with BX. It was BX, um but really Beck me because I used Gazetteer 10, the Orcs of Thar, and you played
Mhm.
humanoids. And unfortunately, the Orcs of Thar was kind of, if you look at the art and read through it, it's kind of silly. Had that sort of silly, very
Yeah, it's
gonzo
pretty funny.
aspect.
Yeah.
But I kind of try to make it more serious. But I don't know. I think it went well for most people.
My favorite one is the art in there is the shaman giving everybody their physical,
Yeah,
see if they're fit for duty.
yeah, yeah. So it's really who's the author on that again? I don't know why. Or who's the Orxathar author? Do you remember?
Uh, no, we'll see who Google it fastest.
Yeah, Orxathar. It is well, I know all the illustrations are by Jim Holloway. Bruce Hurd. So Bruce Hurd is the
It's Bruce Hurd, who's
yeah,
kind of
Yeah, Bruce Hurd's the
And
author.
Bruce Hurd runs he's got a Facebook group that I'm a member of where he kind
Oh
of
well.
keeps Star alive as a setting and as a community.
Yeah. So yeah, there's a big Mystara community. They had like I don't I haven't looked really lately on their website, but I know they had an ongoing fanzine um that they're calling Gazetteer or something. Anyway, but it's pretty impressive, all the fanzine actually. And they
Yeah.
had stuff for all different forms of D&D. But I think what makes it kind of that Gonzo feel or whatever is the Jim Holloway art. So,
Yeah.
inside of there. But yes, Bruce Hurd. But I mean, I liked it. I mean, I think the reviews were very skimpy guidelines. That's what the reviews say. But although a contrary review says does an excellent job of describing the lifestyles of orcs and other humanoids and fun-filled art.
Yeah.
So, but so yeah, so I mean that was a fun game. We got to do domain play, and then for that I used a lot of an echo resounding. So that by that other guy who's I should know.
From Worlds Without Number.
Yeah, the world with that number guy. I have one of Kevin Crawford. I have one of
Yeah.
his books here. I have one of his games that I haven't played yet that I got, which was the Wolves of God. So, but yeah, Kevin Crawford. We used Echo Resounding for that, and I thought it went pretty well. So I think I haven't really. I've been wanting to and dabbling, but it just I think like for my home group who I play with the most, they'd rather do something more contemporary, I guess.
Yeah.
So I think when I didn't jump into another BX game, except for occasional or BX or retro clone type game until you ran Village of Hamlet.
Hmm.
So which I thought went pretty well. I mean, you did OSE, right? OSE.
Yeah. Yeah. We just sort of it's. I think the coolest thing about all that, whether you go back to original D&D all the way up through probably even second. I mean, second some of the splat books, it changes a little bit, but
Yeah,
and I think I'm frozen up here.
you're freezing up now and then.
Okay,
You're fine.
yeah, it's clear now. I said one of the cool things about uh, the TSR era stuff. I don't know the second edition when you start to get into some of the kits and some of the crunchy they put in, they tacked on, on the back half of 2E, but particularly original D&D, all three basic versions, whether it's Holmes, BX, or BECME, and first edition AD&D, you can mix and match stuff. It does. It's not very hard to kind of take what you want, and if there's something's rough, you can just smooth out the edges. And then that it includes all the kind of the newer stuff from the retro clones and then people who've tried to kind of emulate, um, make new rules or new ideas to go on to mix with that stuff. You can just kind of, Hyperborea,
Yep.
um, stuff like that. You can just kind of pull things in and out, and it works pretty easily.
Yeah.
And
So
if
would
it
you say that
doesn't work immediately, you can kind of see where the rough spot is and just kind of fix it in it, and I think that's really cool because you can get back to kind of, I think the real old school way of doing things, whereas every dungeon master kind of really has their own special rule set where they've just kind of taken what they like and don't like and some stuff they made up themselves and
Mhm.
um,
But there's this push to do like rules as written, I guess. But I,
yeah.
how do you believe that? I mean, I don't know. Does everyone really
I,
truly
I
have their house
appreciate
rules?
the challenge of doing rules as written, and I think when you get a new game, I appreciate trying to play it as written as best you can, so you kind of understand kind of the intent of the designer and how it's supposed to play before you start monkeying around with it. But I've been playing Dungeons and Dragons since the '80s, so at this point, I feel comfortable monkeying around with stuff. I also understand being upfront with players if you're going
Mhm.
to do that, um, because I know if someone told me, particularly like a fifth edition, I feel comfortable tweaking fifth edition. At this point, if someone told me we're going to play a fifth edition game, go ahead and make a character and just show up, and then I show up and they've got 25 house rules that kind of
Nerf that
change the
character.
way it's like, well, this character doesn't work the way I thought it was going to work. I don't know.
Right.
I don't, I'm having to relearn. That can be a little bit
Hmm.
difficult. Um, so I think as long as people know, what you've done.
Right. So have
Um,
you had any like sputters or well, I guess in a way, so Broken Lands was cool in that like we're doing domain play. I think characters were getting up to like sixth, seventh level ish. Um and then just various uh things conspired to for people to not be able to make it, something like that. So we were playing like on a Monday and Sunday morning, and then it just two different iterations, which I thought was cool at two different places, but the same, Thar area. So one was more cities and factions, which was really easy to do with BECME BX2, actually. The faction
mm,
stuff. We just tack on a bonus when you're interacting with them, like a reaction, because I love the
yeah,
reaction table, I love the morale table, stuff like that, which, I actually use in a number of things, even not non-OSR games, like a reaction roll to see, because it's very easy, the 2D12, the 2 to 12, and the spread of the type of reaction you can have, which mostly ends up being neutral until something changes. So it's a thing
yeah.
that really works. Yeah, I think, and then I think, so have you had any sputters? I have another sputter, but I don't know if you've had any, like, people just didn't get it or get into it or didn't quite. I don't know if
No, I
Broken
mean,
Lands is a sputter. I guess it just kind of died with a whimper, but I don't know if
yeah,
it's
I
dead.
I think the first OSC campaign I started running for when I started kind of my homebrew was the players had gotten so used to kind of a modern style of D&D. It took some of them a while to adjust. Like at one point, somebody goes, we've been playing forever, and this is the longest I've ever gone that level and up. And I'm like, that's because you guys aren't taking any treasure.
Yeah.
You
Mm,
go, you skirmish, you fight, you kill some goblins or hobgoblins, and you run away. The XP is down in the bottom of the dungeon with their leaders because you got to get the loot
yeah.
because we're doing gold for XP.
Hmm.
Once they kind of got that around, it was like, okay, now I got it. Um, and I think a couple of times we lost a couple of characters because people had forgotten. Like you can't wander off from the group in combat. If you get 30 feet from the rest of the group, you're going to get mobbed.
Mm,
Depending on who if you're fighting a group of monsters, and at first second level you're still pretty squishy,
yeah.
um, versus and there's no death saving throws or negative hit points or
Right. Yeah. I mean, you have to go like to AD&D 1.5, sort of adding the Unearthed Arcana and
yeah.
the Dungeon and Wilderness Survival Guide, uh, OA book to get to like the -10. I think
Mm-hmm.
is when you die, you're bleeding out and stuff like that. Hyperborea does that. I think Hyperborea does that really well. I did dabble with Hyperborea before the campaign that you joined, and I really liked it, but I think I ran into a similar complaint, and I think that's why it sputtered out, is because one of the players is like, I'm not getting anywhere. This XP disparity, they're playing like a barbarian or something, which takes some, there's different the your progression is like, varies depending on your class, right? So when the assassin was like fourth level, the barbarian was to like second level. So he was getting, I guess that player was getting annoyed, and then all his comments that he doesn't want to return to an OSR, OSC, or older school game mechanic type game because you really don't get a lot of progression when you level, which I guess your mileage may vary about that, but I don't know if that's necessary. I mean, you don't get a feat and a increase in ability score, but you still progress. I mean,
I think this brings up a topic we might want to dive into for a minute, and that is character optimization.
mhm, right.
People will criticize character optimization in the modern sense, and we didn't play that way back then. It's like, well, you didn't have to, but you get it if you want to play a wizard with an 8 intelligence, you're taking a 10% XP penalty.
Yeah,
You're not going to level up, and you know um
yeah,
and depending on which version you're playing, it may affect the number of spells you actually can have.
mhm, right.
um versus leaning into, you randomly roll the dice. You really ought to pick a race and class that fits well with those scores because those are up to you. Those aren't randomly determined.
Hmm.
And you'll have XP bonuses and you'll be much better and you will level up. You're never gonna. I mean, someone with a high XP threshold like a barbarian or a paladin or a wizard is not going to level up as fast as a thief or a cleric.
Right.
But it it becomes negligible. They usually level up within a session or two of one another.
Oh yeah, yeah. If someone's behind, they usually catch up really quickly, and that's what I think. That's what's funny is that when we actually played another Hyperborea game, is like one of the player characters died like in the first game or something like that, and then when they brought back another character, they leveled up and caught up, or were just like a level behind the other characters,
Yeah,
within the session, so it doesn't take long to catch up and that type of thing. And that was always curious. I mean, I always love how like the older modules have like from levels 1 to 3 or from levels 4 to 7, right? There's a spread,
yeah,
level 6 to 8 or 9 to 10 or whatever, and there's a spread. Whereas in the more WotC era D&D, it's always for level 1, for level
yeah.
4, right? Yeah, and you will and
And
then like in
they will end at this. They should end about this level, so you can buy the next
the
mod.
next one in this module in the series. Yeah, yeah, like the adventure pass, right? From
Yeah,
that Paizo started when they had Dungeon Magazine, and then now they've continued with their own Pathfinder series APs. And yeah, like so the first adventure, you're gonna go from level 1 to like level 4, right? So and then etc. So it's interesting that then everyone is the same level, and then that has led to, I think, this idea and style of play like, oh, if I miss a session, I better get the XP where I missed the session because then I'm gonna fall behind. Whereas in the older games, right,
yeah.
because of that threshold, the different threshold and levels, then it's not as critical that you fall that
But
you fall behind a level or two. Right.
in older style, you can give characters kind of stuff to do off screen.
Hmm.
That like for example, you could say my character doesn't. Well, but one, if you're doing real time, you're not here. A week has passed since your last adventure,
Yeah.
and maybe the whole group doesn't go on this next adventure, but it's supposed to end in one session so that they can go back home
Right.
and regroup. Um,
But that's
but
what I love about like the wilderness. What's it called? The uh not drag and drop. What is that style of play called where you travel around a hex and you go back to base at the end of
a
the
hex
game?
crawl,
Hex, well, it's a hex crawl, but uh it's what Hobbs did for Kalmata for a long time anyway. But it is kind of like a hex crawl, but the idea is you start at a safe place, and then like the guys from hex crawl use Forlorn Shores to that. But you start at a safe base, and then you go off and you do some exploration. And then by the end of the session, you come back to home base. So
yeah,
yeah, something like that. So that kind of is conducive to that kind of adventure. And then when you tack on like with AD&D, tack on things like training, and then it's staggered. Then sometimes the player who's gone has to be out training, or if the player's out training. And then of course this leads to more like this sort of stable of characters you have. Well, my main is out training, so I can't use it for this adventure. So I'll roll up another
mhm,
character, or I'll use this other character that I've been building, my backup
yeah.
character. So I think that's really curious.
Or you can do. We think of domain play starting at ninth level or thereabouts, but you can start domain play from like as soon as you get money.
Right.
You got to if you got once you get flush with some treasure, you can your base of operations might initially be a townhouse or a cabin.
Or the ruined keep
But
you cleared out, or
yeah,
ruined
but
gatehouse you cleared out.
you hire some peasants and some mercenaries, which are pretty cheap to
Hmm.
to kind of maintain the place while you're out adventuring. And if you're a magic user or a wizard, if your character doesn't make it, maybe there's something. Again, if you got gold, the DM can rule while you were studying a new spell.
Right.
You were researching a spell at this point.
Right. Or
Um,
talking to
if you're a
sages,
fighter,
or
well, you were training your men. So guess what? Your foot soldiers are now have increased their skill set for the
yeah.
next time you want to bring them along for a major battle.
Hmm.
Um, so there's
Yeah.
stuff your character could be doing that benefits you and the rest of the group, even if you don't show up to play and don't go get the XP in the dungeon or on the adventure.
Drop in,
Uh,
drop out.
yeah, drop in, drop out.
So yeah, that's what I was thinking of. Yeah, so I think that Hyperborea game is sputtered, partially because of that. That there was this expectations of a modern type progression in game where you kind of you jump, if not exponentially, sort of what's the other one? Not but between linearly and exponentially, there's oh man, my words are failing me
Well,
today.
I mean, D&D XP is always it's exponential. It's just starting with third edition, it's the same curve for everybody.
Right, right.
But prior to
But
that, you got symmetrical leveling where
yeah, yeah, but you're geometrically. So instead of your power, like it's more of a linear progression as opposed to of power, as opposed to a geometric or exponential even.
yeah,
Well, although I would still say when you get to like certain
yeah,
milestones as a wizard, fifth level, ninth level, fifth level, seventh level, ninth level, when you get third, fourth, and fifth level spells, you know, fireball, cone of cold, teleport, that type of stuff, then those are real big jumps in power, right? So I think,
yeah,
but I think I mean it is kind of sometimes fascinating how that kind of design works. So ultimately, with the monsters of that dungeon level that you're supposed to encounter being just as tough,
yeah.
just as deadly, right? So and I have fond memories playing playing adventures where the characters were very powerful, had amazing magic items, and still, still survive by the skin of their teeth. So,
Yeah.
which is always a fun way to go. So,
And I think when we talk about unbalanced encounters, I mean, the idea of a balanced encounter has been there from the beginning. First level monsters are on the first level of the dungeon, second level monsters on the second level of the dungeon. I think people think that there was no kind of counterbalance in old school. There is. It's just more of a there's still a chance you could run into something more powerful than you, and you gotta be wise enough to realize that and run away.
I think that's built in
I
though,
think the
right? So,
modern
like,
idea behind a balanced encounter is that the the DM should never present an encounter that's unwinnable
right, right,
versus wandering monsters, and particularly out in the wilderness. Yeah, you might roll an encounter with a red dragon, an ancient red dragon.
just
You
flying
should hide.
over, yeah,
You should hide or run away.
right, right, or even in like a dungeon, what if you run into the the monster at the end of the table, like the bugbear at first level? Yeah, maybe,
Yeah,
or and not just one, a few. Maybe you should like run or sneak away or something. So yeah, I
kind
think
of
that's
negotiate.
it, right? It's kind of like um yeah, I think that is the idea. Maybe it's the influence of video games, but in the belief that an encounter should be such that you can always win, and that's I think from WotC era D&D philosophy, really.
But then
Maybe I don't know. Some of those early 3.0 modules are pretty deadly. I mean, so
yeah,
the
yeah.
first couple at least were pretty deadly. Forge of Fury, especially. I mean, I have many a party has gone through that grindstone or that grist mill of Forge of Fury, for example. But you know,
And how do you define win? I mean, if winning is
true.
hitting
When
somebody in combat, but if winning can also be negotiating,
mhm.
um, tricking, outsmarting, outwitting.
Talking down an adversary, yeah,
Yeah,
negotiating.
yeah. And I always give people the XP if they do that.
Yeah,
This is an obstacle. One way around it is to kill it, but if you can find another way around it,
yeah,
you neutralize the threat and overcame the obstacle. You get the XP.
right, right, cool. Yeah, so all right. Did you have any sputters? What about current stuff then?
I had those ones of that first group, and once we kind of got our head around it, no. And then with you guys, I mean, it was you guys are used to that kind of play when we did Village of Homeland,
Yeah,
and then with the kids, they don't know anything else, so they're just like, oh, whatever you say. I'm just happy. I'm happy to be playing D&D. I always wondered what it was like, and I said, well,
yeah,
if you go over to the game store, it's going to be very different because they're probably going to be running fifth edition or
yeah.
maybe Pathfinder, and this is not even something you'll find in a book because I've got like three or four sources I've cobbled together to
Hmm.
kind of give it. I wanted to. use Knave. There's some stuff I liked about Knave and Cairn. I didn't want to go full Cairn. I still want to try to put full Cairn old school,
Yeah, I still want to play We Deal and Let again.
but I wanted to give them a taste of kind of classic D&D tropes. So I didn't. I
Mhm.
wanted to keep the 6 ability scores. I wanted to keep
Mhm.
classes and races, at least the classic 4 core classes and the core species that have always been kind of part of D&D. Versus Knave is sort of an all human classless system. But one thing I liked about Knave, I liked some of the mechanics. I like the slot based inventory. I know we just talked about asymmetric versus symmetric leveling. It is kind of symmetric
Mhm.
leveling. So it's real easy to grasp for a new player. Although I think we sometimes assume new players are going to have trouble grasping ideas. And when I'm particularly learning about my son and his friends, they've played so many video games and so many board games and so many other sorts of things. That kind of stuff doesn't throw them for a loop,
Yeah,
you know.
yeah, it's true. It's
And
that's
they've logged a lot of role playing game hours than I realized playing computer role playing games. Now it's
sure.
still kind of the linear railroad of a computer role playing game, but even things like Minecraft and the current Legend of Zelda games,
Mhm.
Skyrim, those are still somewhat, they're a quest to pick up, but they're also kind of open world. You can kind of move around,
Yeah,
as you want and set your priorities somewhat. So that it's not as quite the um as difficult a concept as I think some people might think. Oh, they're all there playing video games. They're not going to understand a tabletop role playing game. Well, the video role playing games that have come out over the last 8 or 9 years
20 years,
do a
however
pretty
long.
good job of it.
Yep.
So I wanted to keep some of those simplicities from Nave. So I'm not using the Nave kind of combat mechanics. I stuck with the BX combat mechanics, and I'm just
Mhm.
using the Nave system to sort of determine characters and monsters kind of hit points and attack bonuses and saves and things like that. But we're still going through the procedural, and we're still using sort of BX rolls for weapon damage and armor class and things like that. Um, but it's they really enjoyed it because given that class structure lets them kind of lean into some of the archetypes
Yeah.
that I think they might not really gel onto.
Mhm.
Again, because they've played those kind of open source role playing games, but those are games where um, I think Skyrim and maybe World of Warcraft, maybe the only ones they've played, other than Baldur's Gate, if they picked up the new Baldur's Gate, where you
Right.
pick a class and have specialties versus, when you play Legend of Zelda, you're just Link and you are
Mhm.
what you are.
Yeah.
Minecraft, you're just some sort of nondescript castaway in this weird world, and you know.
Hmm.
But in those games, what you can do is more based on your equipment and your
Yeah,
gear, which is a lot more old school. You
that's
know,
true. Yeah, yeah. It's less your, yeah, like now, like the modern D&D or fifth edition, like there's less emphasis on gear and it's more your raw ability, right? And
yeah,
your power. And
and that's
whereas
where you,
whereas Pathfinder or 3.5 is your stuff,
yeah,
is what you become, like the Christmas tree effect, right? You always got to get that stuff,
yeah.
right? So which is curious. And um I mean, I would say AD&D is kind of about stuff, but because it's cool to get that stuff. That was the funnest part for me. It was always rolling randomly on the loot table because I never had a random encounter. They get to the lair. Oh, what did they have? I don't know. Let's roll randomly on their loot
It
table.
always reminds me though of one of the reasons I always say if I'm going to go back and play second edition, I'm not going to use proficiencies, or I'm going to change the proficiencies.
Oh,
I got a random loot. I playing it's AD&D second edition. I was playing an Elven Ranger, um, and we got these random magic items, and one of them was a pipes of haunting, and nobody else could use it. And I'm like, well, I'll take it. So then when I got some proficiencies bonus, and that was a cross class proficiency. I did Vessel in it. I've got a basic proficiency to be able to play, pan pipes. And then like one or two adventures later, we had some major effect where it was a random chance to destroy everything in our inventory, and my magical pipes got destroyed. So it's like, well, I wasted some proficiency slots to make this kind of a signature magic item for my character.
I like proficiencies. I would use them. I'm
I would
gonna
use them, but I would change them a little bit.
okay. Yeah, I like proficiencies. I know there's towards the end of second edition when they started trying to test out some of the third edition stuff that came later.
Yeah,
Just like third edition did that when fourth edition was about to come out, right? There's
yeah.
like the Book of the Nine
Book of
Swords or
Nine
whatever I
Swords.
remember. So I don't know. Those are the where it kind of went jumped the shark, like Fonzie.
Yeah. The thing I have said, if I was going to go back and do like second edition as a DM, I wouldn't use weapon proficiencies. You can use any weapon that's listed in your class, and then I would just use them to allow fighters their weapon specialization
Yeah, that's probably a
abilities.
simple way to do it.
And then I would greatly simplify the list of non-weapon proficiencies and not make it so difficult to take something that was, you know, cross class.
Huh.
That is one thing I do appreciate about kind of modern gaming design is it lets you kind of those skills are supposed to be there to help you kind of realize different character concepts.
Yeah.
And it can get overly penalizing to, you know. I mean, I guess that I know now that there's different answers, but I think the thing that always bugged me when I was like in high school playing second edition D&D
Mm.
was so a proficiency slot is a proficiency slot, right? Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
In second edition, yeah.
Say when we get some new weapon proficiencies, how come a fighter can use that to learn to use a scimitar, but a wizard can't? It's it's the same amount of time, you know.
Yeah. Well, in first edition they were separated, but and
Yeah,
non-fighter classes got more proficiencies, non-weapon proficiencies than fighter classes for the most.
yeah,
But yeah, it's
yeah.
interesting. But in second edition, yeah, it's all blended together in a
I
way.
think was it somebody pointed out, it was Jason or Daniel who recently pointed out that when they first introduced weapon proficiencies, a magic user would gain more weapon proficiencies than weapons were allowed because they were only allowed like two or three weapons. So at some point they would start getting non-weapon or weapon proficiencies that they couldn't
They
use because
couldn't
it's
use, yeah. But
um,
yeah, I don't know. I don't know if that's true. But then like Unearthed Arcana introduced a bunch of new weapons, that
mhm.
like darts or atlotls or something like that. Oh, a wizard can use atlotl. I don't know. I don't know if this is true. Like a wizard could
Yeah,
use an atlotl.
darts and slings and
Yeah,
uh,
stuff like that. Shuriken.
yeah. Why
Wien
a
would all
wizard
use.
can't use a club, I don't know.
Yeah,
It's just a stick that you hit people, you know.
yeah. I don't know. It's strange. Maybe in I
If
don't
you
know.
if you've ever had a wound up toddler with a stick, it doesn't take a lot of skill to do a lot of damage.
Well, I
Just
mean,
to,
there's always these things that are probably in there for balance reasons that make no logical sense, like clerics using a spiked phalanged or phalange mace,
yeah,
but they can't use a sword when they still cause someone to bleed profusely with the right type of hit,
yeah,
right? So, or there's many a movie where it shows like a club or a stick causes someone to bleed pretty badly. So,
yeah.
it's kind of it's weird. But so all right, so let's switch gears a little bit in this last set part of the podcast segment. So what's working or what do you have? Well, you already talked about what's working. Any other plans you might have in the future for an old school game?
I
Oh, actually, I should ask first. What about so I know we have a couple games going on. So you think they're done, or you think we could pick them up? And those being the Hyperborea game and the Lost City game.
I'd like to put both of those up. I think we just run out of time because we've got so many
Too many
games
other
going.
games, yeah. Yeah.
You mentioned I think Janelle Jaquays is kind of on all our minds this week
Mhm.
with her passing. Wanting to do the Caverns of Thracia and Hyperborea. I'm down for that.
Oh,
Just to
it totally works.
pick up
Yeah.
our finish what we're doing right now in Hyperborea and do that as a game.
Hmm.
But I also would like to finish the Lost City.
Yeah.
So, um, yeah, I think it's just
I like the
we've got
idea of the Lost
we've
City.
got we've got one weekly game slot in 4 games.
Yeah, yeah.
Got to cram into it.
Yeah. I think one of the players has said that, oh, we should make this a regular game somewhere, not just make it a backup game. It's too bad. But I like the concept of the Lost City because you guys are playing two players, but you guys are playing like three characters each, right? In a way, which is kind of
Yeah,
you have like a main in your mind and then a couple sidekicks. I think that's kind of cool. To me, it's interesting. And if one dies and then the next one steps up, I guess, or you pick up, one of these weird people that live in the pyramid, right? So I think we lost you, BJ. Froze up. Can you hear me? Now you talk, but now you're back, sort of. You're like Max Headroom.
Yeah, we got a little other glitch there. Yeah,
Yeah,
I think if you play three characters, you start thinking of one of them as kind of the main. Yeah, this is the guy I identify with the most or having the most
yeah,
fun with.
yeah. I really do like out of the retro clones. I really do like Hyperborea is probably one of my favorite, and I don't know why I always forget talking about it, but I really do enjoy it. I like how they you take a lot of these subsystems like reaction rolls, like morale. I like the way they do the combat and the sort of pre-movement and then no movement actions and then movement plus actions now, and then side initiative. And it's still it's descending armor class as the way it should be, right? So yeah, I do like Hyperborea. And I still, I mean, I always have like, oh, I guess I never think a game is like totally dead because I was like, oh, if we were to pick this up, I know where we'd be, right? I don't know if players remember, but at least as a GM know.
Yeah.
I think what I have been wanting to do, though, I think maybe because of your talk of OSE and all that kind of stuff, I have been wanting to run like an OSE, probably advanced OSE game, and then running like the at least A0, because a lot of people have seen A1 through A4, but A0 was added on in like like a class. It was like a classic remake when they put all four of those books together, or A1 through A4, and they put an A0 there. So like a lower level before levels 4 to 7. Um, so you
Uh-huh.
investigate this quarry. So I think that'd be fun to do. Um, and then I have another idea. We're just doing like a D&D in the realms, trying to do it as written. And I propose doing that with like solo in a way, or one duel, like one character with Amy. And I've made a character and I have the Roll20 set up, but we haven't done it yet. But I don't know. I don't know if she'll like it. She's not a big fan of dungeon crawls really. So, and that's a lot of these adventures are you're predicated on pacing through a dungeon of some sort or in some way, right? But
Yeah. Well,
not necessarily a mega dungeon. Although I did have like an OSE Barrow Maze mega dungeon on Roll20 somewhere. So, and that could be
yeah.
interesting.
I'm
That'd
kind of
be interesting.
curious. What's the dividing line between a mega dungeon, and just a really big dungeon?
Yeah, I think a mega dungeon is like one that you like in Barrow Maze, where there's this place where you keep going back to over and over and over, or like the halls of Arden Vul that's on Bundle of Holding right now, which I do have too, which like a place you keep going back to town, going out there, going back to town. So I think they did that with the Castle White Rock too. The DCC did that back in 3.5, 3.0,
Would,
3.5 days.
would, would you call
Undermountain,
Abomination?
yeah, Abomination will also be a mega dungeon because the whole adventure series is predicated on you going back and forth between Otari and the dungeon, right? So
Yeah.
you've cleared levels one through 3 or 1 to 4, and now you're going to delve deeper. And then by the end of the adventure, you cleared all whatever,
Yeah.
however many levels are. Much like Undermountain, right? Undermountain was also a mega dungeon, right? Back in
Yeah.
Forgotten Realms Water. I guess it's still around in 5th edition, but you know, I picked up the old black and purple box way back.
To me, at this point, Undermountain is not. I don't even think of Undermountain as a mega dungeon. As I think of Undermountain as a region of Forgotten Realms, because it's so classic. It's like, well, I kind of don't want anybody to clear it out and get rid of it. It's
Well,
like,
it's supposed to be repopulated all the time, right?
yeah. I guess that's probably the idea behind the mega dungeon, is it gets repopulated. You
Yeah,
don't
yeah,
clear
and
it.
Barrow Maze, Greg Gillespie has rules for repopulating areas and stuff like that too. So, and he
Yeah.
also has Highfell is really cool, and then he has another one. But yeah, I'd love to run one of those, and I probably would use OSE or advanced OSE.
Yeah.
I think I would do that. But I did want to delve into doing a straight AD&D, so maybe I'm going to try to target that for March. What about you? Anything else you got on your table
Well, I
percolating?
got a lot of stuff I want to try. I just don't know
Oh,
when I'm going to get to it. I want to try Dragonbane.
yeah.
I've got that. and I just haven't had a chance to kind of delve into it as far as kind of fantasy.
Yeah,
It's not so much an old. Well, I guess it is kind of old school. It's just not
right.
old
So
school that we're used to. It's they've sort of revitalized a game from Europe.
right,
Was big. Kind of it is kind of their old. It would be their old school.
right.
Um, I want to try that, and then as far as modern games, Coyote and Crow. I think we're going to try to
Yeah,
play one or two sessions of that just to see how it runs. Um, and then mostly, I'm kind of just interested in kind of building my campaign, my uh, kind of drop in, drop out, kind of shared world with different groups, and seeing if they can like, even if they never meet up, they like you know wander into an area, and the lay of that area has been affected by another groups have gone and had an adventure there
yeah,
sometime before.
yeah. And for me, inspired by TJ Drennan too, I wanted to go back and take a look at Keep on the Borderlands. I know you've done that in a really cool way.
Mhm.
We before you described that before on your
Yeah,
podcast, but I would just want to look back into that or that same Goodman Games is this old OAR series and
yeah,
Lost Secret or the Lost City, and then or In Search of the Unknown, and well, Lost City is one of those, but In Search of the Unknown and Keep on the Borderlands is in one tome, and then they have Isle of Dread and Castle Amber, the Temple of Elemental Evil one as well.
yeah.
So they have a lot of those fun things. It'd be fun to delve back into those. And then of course the what we mentioned, the aforementioned Caverns of Thracia, I think would be so I got my home group players, but it's a backup game when some people don't show up and there's I think there's one player who plays anything and he likes anything, so that's not a problem with that player. And then there's two players out of the group of five who really liked Hyperborea. They like the aesthetic of Hyperborea. They like that sword sorcery science fiction
Mhm.
world, and they're playing. I think because they're playing kind of in their mind cool concept characters like a Amazonian berserker or something like that. And it's a really like so like imagine Michelle Rodriguez's character from the movie, basically
Mhm.
that. And then
Yeah.
the other guy's playing like I think he's playing a rogue. Oh no, he's playing the rogue that can cast spells, like the temple thief or something like
Oh
that.
yeah.
And
Yeah.
he's really found some interesting things and some of the adventures and anyway, so they travel to like this Fort Thunder, which is on this island in an archipelago, and further inside, they've the Amazons have discovered this degenerate peoples that have a Thracian origin. They're therefore the lost caverns of Thracia. What's it called? Caverns of Thracia. So then
Yeah.
that would be like the Fort Thunder is like your refuge, and you can drop in, drop out, go explore the island or try to find the caverns of Thracia or deal with Ixians who are probably also there. So other rival groups on the island. So I think that's a concept I have in my mind that I really need to work out. And it'd be fun. It'd be fun to run multiple iterations, just like you're running multiple iterations, but iterations in the same world that could actually, you know, influence. You follow a rumor of, oh, I heard that the Ixians have this hidden cove somewhere. I don't like my characters don't like Ixians. We're going to go after that. And then when the other group tries to go after it, well, it's been destroyed or already or been dealt with, or they've reinforced it
Yeah.
because the first group got failed. So I mean stuff like that it can affect. That's a fun concept, and I think Jason Connolly brought that up somewhere, but it'd be kind of neat to do. It's like a shared world, right, with different groups of adventurers. So, and even like you have what? So in your group, it's different. They're playing different characters, right? The players
Well,
are
my son
overlap.
right now is the only one in both groups, and he's playing a
Okay,
different character
okay,
in each group. There are a couple other ones who said, "Oh, well, maybe that might be fun." We'll see
yeah,
it. We'll see how many wind up doing it. But
mhm.
that's where that Gary Gygax's emphasis on strict keeping of time records,
Yeah,
so that um, who's been where and when. So they can actually see you know
yeah.
the world has changed based on this other group had been there last week, last month.
Yeah, I love those old modules. Like I originally wanted to do the Isle of Dread, and I would run it fifth edition because that's what the players wanted to play, and they had the OAR one. And I was so they found, but I had like a prequel, where they found this boat in a cave that was all messed up, and they needed to get funds or find someone to support them to get funds to rebuild it, and then get the expedition together for Isle of Dread. So that's where I was going to use a veiled society, because I was hoping they'd go to that city and then find a noble patron. But unfortunately, I had a random encounter with the slavers called the Iron Ring, which is in
Yeah.
Mystara. There's Iron Ring, and then they went on a different tangent and wanted to destroy the Iron Ring. So unfortunately, that boat was still. But we were keeping time to when that boat would be ready for the expedition. But they got so distracted, and then I ran, and then from Veil Society, wanting to run Veil Society, into Knight's Terrors. So you know,
Yep.
yeah. So
Now, you're talking about Thracia,
pesky adventures.
the next old original adventure reincarnated coming out is the Dark Tower,
Yes.
another Jaquays. I've got that. I backed that. I'd like to run that, but I actually really wouldn't mind running those with fifth edition, because you can get the original ones on PDF if you want to just do it old school. I would like to go back and run some of those as fifth edition at some point, probably uh, with some house ruling and some stuff. One, I would really like to import into fifth edition if I go back to running it, some of the procedural stuff that is more. It's kind of all there as
Mm-hmm.
options for the DM, but it's not ever laid out in a way that kind of says, "Hey, if you do it this way, this is a tried and true method to make sure people stay on task, that,
Right.
the pacing keeps going." I just kind of say, well, it's up to the DM, but it doesn't ever really present it like, hey, I don't know really how to do this as a DM. How would I do it by default?
Yeah.
Versus old school teaches you that just in the procedures they lay out on how to resolve stuff. And it's like, here's a procedure to use. You don't have to do it if you don't want to, but here it is, as opposed to, here's a bunch of stuff. If you'd like to turn that into a procedure, you're free to do that. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
And I think Pathfinder tries to do that too, with like exploration mode and combat mode, but it just, I think, I don't know if it, maybe as a GM, one has to emphasize that more, that
yeah,
this
yeah.
procedure. I do like that's something that I could pull from Shadow Dark, though, that I really did like, is how you can spotlight shift on the characters. You just have them roll that sort of social initiative that
Yeah.
our GM Anne introduced, and all right, so what do you want to do during exploration mode or walking around town mode or whatever? What do you want to do? Switch. That's a great idea to just rotate around. But I don't know. It's hard to, as a GM. I mean, without those procedures, it's hard. It's kind of sometimes honestly hard to remember. And then it's also easier for one player who's very talkative and is about driving the action to hog the spotlight, even if they don't want to, they just wanted things to move forward, right?
I
So
can't remember if it was might have been, what does he go by now? He's changed his name again. Brandon Gilmish, previously Hankern and Fernell, previously Drunken and Dragons, the guy who does Index Art Card RPG.
okay.
I can't remember if it was something I read of his, either on his YouTube or one of his products, where he said, always be an initiative.
Hmm. That's interesting.
Just always, whether you want to re-roll initiative when a combat's over to reestablish it, or just keep whatever it was in the previous combat till it's time to re-roll. Even at a combat, be an initiative, and then you still you still know to go. What are you going to do?
What
What
are
are
you
you
gonna
going to do?
do?
What are you going to do? And then you set the time scale as, right now, are we doing things that take a few minutes? Are we doing things that take a few seconds? Are we doing something that's an hour? Are we doing something that's today?
Mm-hmm.
And you say, okay, for the next few seconds, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? What are you going to do? Okay, well, things have slowed down. For the next 10 minutes, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? What are you going to do? For the next hour, or, hey, we're in town, we're taking a day off. What are you going to do today? What are you going to do today?
Yeah,
But to keep it in that order so that you
that's a
remember to
great
go back
idea.
to everybody and keep people from kind of
Yeah,
hogging the spotlight.
yeah, that's a great idea. Yeah, even in like shift games would have like a shift clock, right? Like a Twilight 2000, for example. What are you doing this shift? And then what do you go to the next part, kind of have them roll initiative, and then what are you doing this shift? What are you doing this shift? And kind of rotate around to see what they're doing. Instead of just asking sort of randomly on your screen. I think
Because then
that's
you
what,
got the person has kind of all these things they want to do, and it's like, okay, I just need to know what's the first thing you're going to do because you got about 5 minutes to do that.
Yeah,
What can
yeah.
you realistically describe that, and then I'm going to the next person, and we'll come back around to you.
Right, right. Yep. Yeah,
Again, there's kind of a procedure you get in there, whether you want to call that or not, that kind of keeps the game moving.
yeah. And speaking of procedures in a modern game, and I think they're still viable, like I've been playing some Walking Dead recently, and they have a for combat, they have a neat like procedural. So they have like a mobility check to go for cover, then you do range combat, then you do close combat, then you do movement, then you do other. So I think
Mhm.
that's those concepts are still there even in a modern game, and I think they're extremely helpful. Right, that really helps ground the players, in the moment. I think.
Well, I think it's not a free for all then when everybody's
Right,
trying to, like when you do individual initiative and you say, okay, you can move and take one action, or you have three actions, and something like spell casting takes two of them. Instead of everybody trying to call that all together, because theoretically all these things are happening at once.
right.
You can never get down to just making them all happen once. But when you go through those phases of anybody's going to move, move. Anybody who's going to do this.
Yeah,
It
yeah,
kind of it gives that more sense of, yeah, all that stuff just kind of happened over a span of 5 to 10 seconds.
yeah. But some people balk at that. They hate that. They would rather have the free for all. So I don't know. Can't please everyone, I guess.
It didn't make sense to me when I got back into it. But it's interesting to me. And you say some people don't like it. I wonder, are you thinking primarily if some DMs don't like it, or if there are a lot of players that don't like
Players,
it?
players.
So I think it's easy as a player, and it may not be what you're dealing with, but I think it's easier as a player to have a lot of preferences when you're not the one trying to coordinate five, six, seven other people.
Hmm.
Um, I think one of the things I've come to learn and really come to appreciate as a game master in the last couple of years is, and that's where I've become more open to playing any kind of rule set or any kind of game. Really, is I want to play a game that the game master understands and can run, and because it's on the game master to keep the game going. It's on everybody else to contribute to make it a fun experience and to participate, but the game master has to be able to describe what's happening, adjudicate the results of actions, and move on to the next thing. So I would rather play with a game master using a rule set they're comfortable with and they can use proficiently.
Hmm.
Um, and that's the exception is when we're getting into a new game none of us have played before. Obviously, there's going to be a lot of stops and pauses and things like that. I enjoy doing that because I know we do that from time to time.
Yeah.
But if we're just going to, you know, hey, let's do a fantasy campaign. What game do we want to use? Well, whatever the GM wants, because I want the GM to understand what the rules are and be able to plan and
Yeah.
make use of that instead of sort of trying to pick up a system that they don't know just to please everybody else. That
Hmm.
just
Yeah.
I think that's why I'm thinking if I was ever going to when I go back and run 5e, I'm going to pull off the procedurals
Yeah.
because it makes me more comfortable in running it and keeping things going. And I think the players have a better experience
Yeah.
when the GM can kind of keep things going.
Well, cool. Well, on that positive note and advice by the sage wisdom of BJ Boyd, we'll stop here. And I hope you've enjoyed our conversation. Thanks for listening. Anything you want to plug, BJ, before we say goodnight?
I just keep listening to the Arcane A list. We'll figure out what these young teenage players can figure out to do.
Yeah, and you can watch BJ put his 5e knowledge to good use in our ongoing Tales from the Broken Anvil Eberron campaign for 5e on our YouTube channel. And I think that's it. So like, subscribe. Don't worry about it if you're listening to this on the podcast, but if you're on the YouTube, seeing it on the YouTube, please like and subscribe. My
This is
producer,
procedural for
yes,
social media.
this is
Like,
true.
subscribe.
And my producer always reminds me to do that. And with that, without further ado, good night and good rolling.